Ladies and gentlemen, it is the Midnight Hour once again for Midnight Kentucky. I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
We usually do this at the end of the show, but we're going to bring it right up front tonight. If you guys are fans of the show and like what we're doing, please get on social media, follow us. We are on
Twitter,
Facebook,
MidnightKentucky.com,
and our publishing company, YouTube, Ransom Letter Publishing. There's not been a lot of stuff going on there lately. We are going to have new episodes up on there very, very soon. And there's going to be a lot of cool stuff going on over at the Ransom Letter Publishing page, beyond Midnight Kentucky, even for the future. So keep checking that out. I know that there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that you guys are going to like. And in addition, I think we're kind of starting to find our voice for the show, find out kind of how we're wanting to format it. If you guys have noticed, last week we did the January episode with just a little snippet of news up front. I think we're going to start doing that monthly, and then the initial show do maybe an interview or just a full story on something. So, you know, we're trying that out. May not stick with that, but that's how we're looking at things for the future. So if you guys like that, let us know. If you guys like the way that things are going right now, let us know. I feel like we're kind of hitting our stride for the show. Kind of figuring out how we want to continue to do the show in the future and how we want to approach these subjects and stuff. So, and in addition,
we have a live show coming up at the Sidecar in Lexington, Kentucky on Friday the 13th. Coming up in March. I'd appreciate everybody coming out and see us and go off the rails with us.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great show. Our first live show ever, and it may very likely go off the rails. So come check that out. We will have Culture Trap, John Swanson, and the debut of the Unusual Encounters band with us. It's going to be a great show. If you guys are fans, come out, hang out with us, talk to us, tell us about your weird stuff, tell us about weird stuff you've heard. We will be talking about the possible UFO crash with the CSS train car in Paintsville, Kentucky. Pretty wild story, definitely interesting. Right there in a old train car. So
I think it's appropriate.
Welcome to Kentucky.
The birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
But when the hour grows late, the Bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Veiled Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes wrong in the Bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. Tonight, we are going to start out this episode by talking about some of the high strangeness and high strangeness news that has occurred in February of 2020. And there is certainly the span of oddness that has happened. If you guys remember, back on the In Conversation with Daniel Wilson episode, we dug in deep on drone sightings around Kentucky. I had also written an article for our local paper on these drone sightings. These sightings are pervasive enough that I feel like, you know, people are seeing these things in Kentucky, all around Kentucky.
Yeah, I think it's not just here where we live, but I think all across the state people are seeing these, and there's no explanation really for them other than they're obviously a drone or they're, you know, an unidentified flying object.
Yeah, the very definition of it. It's some type of unidentified flying object. And of course, as we talked about on the In Conversation with Daniel Wilson episode, not only have people been seeing it in Kentucky, actually, we're still trying to work out getting these sightings in Kentucky kind of more well-known and getting it out to people. But over the Christmas holiday and into the New Year, the media blew up with sightings in, I think, Nebraska, Colorado?
It was on the Colorado-Nebraska line.
Right. And, of course, just a few weeks ago, Vice ran an article. The name of the article is Mass Panic. It's not clear that Colorado's mystery drones even exist. This is a very well-written article. It's by Aaron Gordon. It's actually from Motherboard, which is Vice's tech session. But it's basically saying that these reports out of Colorado and Nebraska were mass panic. That this task force that was set up to go out and search for these things spent 5 hours looking and found nothing, and that they think that these drones may not even exist.
I'm highly skeptical of that explanation.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the fact that they even felt the need to come out and say that this may be mass hysteria reeks of when they come out with Roswell and said that, years later in 1997 and said that it was a mogul spy balloon. Why not just leave well enough alone?
I mean, I'm just like, really, people, do you really think we're the stupid? And honestly, this discredits Vice and Motherboard completely, and I like both publications.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both. I watch Vice's channel a lot,
And I started, honestly, when I seen this, I started flipping through their advertisers and seeing if I can find an industrial military complex somebody.
Was there anything on there?
No. I'm sure that's probably undisclosed.
Sure, yeah.
But I think this is a planted story.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder now if the drones have disappeared, because I haven't heard any new reports.
Sure.
And I'm kind of like, guys, enough people seen this, and there was enough stories wrote about it, that obviously something was there. This was not no mass confusion panic situation.
Absolutely.
If there is, you might want to start looking for a gas leak somewhere.
Sure. But, this is an aspect of it that they didn't take into account. And I'm not tooting our own horn here, but we were reporting on the drones in our area long before the story even come out that something was going on in Colorado and Nebraska. We were seeing these things. People in Kentucky were seeing these things without a doubt. I've saw these things firsthand. You saw these things firsthand.
We all have seen them, and we've all seen them independent of each other.
Right.
And enough people have seen them and then come to us with videos and pictures and things of them. And this is outside of what's happening in Colorado.
Right.
So, I mean, you can't say it's mass hysteria everywhere where these are being seen. I mean, you can't expect people to be that naive and believe that.
Exactly. And let's just say for a moment that what's happening in Colorado and Nebraska is mass hysteria. Well, that doesn't discount the fact that something is being seen here and that it continues to be seen here. So how many coincidences are too many? If it's all mass hysteria in Colorado, isn't it kind of coincidental that months before we started seeing something here that many people have saw and reported and, know what these things are?
Yeah, I find it highly coincidental. And I kind of think, they're the same phenomenon, whatever it is.
Right.
Whatever's going on out there is possibly going on here. One reason I think they're saying it's mass hysteria in that area of Colorado is, what's Colorado known for?
Cattle mutilations.
Cattle mutilations. Of course, the Rocky Mountains,
sure.
Obviously. But the industrial military complex
Absolutely.
has a massive footprint.
Absolutely. And I actually think we talked about that a little bit when we initially covered the drones over Colorado.
We did, yeah.
And here.
And a lot of these sightings are close to military bases.
Right.
And not saying that's where they're coming from, but it's possible this is some type of research and development project going on.
They actually mentioned in this article that maybe that there was a theory that these drones were maybe a top secret government program to detect unused nuclear warheads. So I thought that was interesting. I don't think that's what it is, but I thought the theory was interesting.
That's a very good theory. I think whatever it is, Vice and Motherboard was told to toss the story out here to, and maybe they were instructed to do it, and Vice and Motherboard did it so obvious that it made people question it even more.
Sure. And, I will give the writer a lot of credit for the article, because at no point does he directly say, actually he says, far be it from me to discredit any of these experiences that these people are having. And, as an investigator on either side, I think that's how we have to approach these things. People are definitely experiencing something, whether it's the phenomena that we're investigating or not.
Yeah, I kind of definitely think people are seeing stuff, and unless you are there seeing it yourself, you can't discredit anybody.
Right, absolutely.
Especially this amount of people who're seeing it.
Very much.
But to say it's mass hysteria, in my opinion, it's kind of reckless to throw that out there.
Sure.
And it almost seems like it's covering up something.
Right. Like I said, to me it definitely reeks of the Project Mogul excuse, or Project Mogul. An excuse that the Air Force put out in '97 for Roswell. And again, I'm not sure about what happened at Roswell. I don't know if that was the crash from alien craft or what, but I have a hard time believing it was any type of balloon, weather balloon, or a secret spy balloon, or anything like that. And I have a hard time believing that what every single one of these people is seeing is some type of misidentification, especially given that we're seeing the same things here in Kentucky, really on the same volume as they are in Colorado.
Exactly. I would say it's almost the same volume right here in this area.
Right.
I mean, I'm really shocked they didn't say the favorite thing to blame everything on, Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked back in,
right.
in the 1940s
right.
with everything.
The funniest part that I found with this article, though, is the fact that this task force, quotation marks, and I have no inside knowledge, I just thought this was interesting. This task force that was put together to supposedly hunt these things out, hunted for 5 hours one day, and then they were like, okay, I guess we're done. Like, that's 5 hours, man. Like, you and I both know that 5 hours is nothing in the grand scheme of looking for these things.
Oh, no. I mean, I would think maybe 5 weeks, 5 months would be sufficient, not 5 hours.
Yeah. At 5 hours, they were like, well, I guess that's enough to write up a report.
And what those 5 hours were spent doing.
Sure.
Getting your equipment ready, calibrating your equipment, driving around, waiting in traffic.
Right.
A lot can happen in 5 hours,
Sure.
And that can go by really quickly, especially in this type of investigation.
Absolutely. 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 So this next news item takes us from the skies of Colorado and Kentucky to the depths of outer space. And of course, we are talking about the fast radio bursts that have been detected coming in periodically on a normal periodic wave. This comes from Science News, and I will include all of these articles in the show notes so you guys can read them. The name of this article is, "This is the first fast radio burst known to have a steady beat. A blast of radio waves from deep space appears to be on a 16-day cycle," meaning that I believe it comes in for 4 days. Same message 4 days at a time, and then we'll go out for 12 days, if I'm thinking right. And then right on schedule, it'll come back for 4 days.
Yeah, it's like a 16-day rotation.
Right. And I know that, of course, in the late 90s, early 2000s, these fast radio bursts were what everybody was waiting on. I mean, every person that, was searching for extraterrestrial life was waiting for one of these radio bursts, because potentially this is another society reaching out to us. I mean, the greatest possibility we can imagine is that these radio bursts are coming from some advanced or, some other society that is out there in space. Of course, we've had several of these fast radio bursts that have come in. I think since 2007, researchers have cataloged over 100 of these fast radio bursts, but this is the first one to come in with a periodicity of what it is, and to repeat the same thing over and over, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah. And for me, this is very interesting. I'm a amateur radio operator.
Yeah.
I'm by no means a expert in this type of stuff. But I know enough that if this is coming in on a predictable cycle, this is, they describe this as kind of like a repeater that's repeating the signal, and it's kind of like a beacon.
Right.
And whatever this 16-day cycle, is going on, it's a 16-day cycle to us.
Right.
But in this world it's coming from, that
could be years.
It could be years. It could be every 5 minutes.
Sure.
Their time is probably not set up the same way we are because of their planet rotation around their star.
And there's also that whole physics thing that I don't understand at all, about how the further you go into space, the further you go into time.
Exactly. So, wherever these are coming from and we're receiving them, but this could be from billions of years ago.
Right.
Millions of years ago. It's quite how far it's coming from and getting to us. But the fact that it's getting to us and it's predictable cycle,
right? This
is being created by, in my opinion, intelligent life of a technological type society similar to what we have.
So you think that, given your knowledge of radio, and like you said, but you're pretty knowledgeable on radio. You understand a lot of different things about this. You think, from your expertise or from your knowledge of these things, that this could be intelligently driven?
I can't see where, unless if it was like environmental driven,
sure,
or done something by something going on out in outer space, unless it's some type of rotation of the planet or a moon, and it's causing this beacon to go off or whatever, this signal to be sent out in some form or fashion by some type of magnetic pull,
right,
or something. But since it's on a basis, it's almost like possibly like
an SOS almost.
Yeah, it's almost like an SOS. But there's possibilities that this society no longer exists, that this radio wave is continually going out, and it's layered in our time, 16-day pattern.
Sure.
And these things are lined up in this waves.
Could be 600 years.
600 years worth of radio signals coming to us.
Right. That's a very good point. Well, the most interesting side of the story for me, and we'll get more into this with our next news item, is kind of like we were discussing before the show, I think. We were talking about all of these different things that were happening with disclosure and with the dark days warnings that we talked about early in season 1. And kind of the Space Force that we were talking about on last month's news roundup. I find it interesting that all of these things are happening at once. And I'm totally going to butcher this name, but the Oumuamua comet, or the Oumuamua object, because it certainly doesn't seem like a comet at this point. It seems like it might be some type of spacecraft.
Right.
I find it interesting that all of this is happening now, a year after we started getting these warnings that dark days were ahead. The fact that the Space Force started up after Stephen Greer's Unacknowledged documentary, which was blatantly about this Project Bluebeam, where, there would be this false flag alien invasion, and it would be to basically, lock down on Earth's population by, military forces. Maybe some extra dimensional forces played their hand in this as well. But, looking at that and then looking at this mass amount of information, this Oumuamua object that is supposedly heading toward us, these fast radio bursts that we're supposedly getting, the admittance of the DoD that they were running 2 separate UFO investigation programs. I don't know. I think that's interesting that all of this is happening at once.
And the timing of it is very curious.
Yeah.
And that this type of stuff keeps coming out. It is kind of make you wonder, what else are they going to bring out?
Right.
The creation of the Space Force. I know there was a lot of comedy and riffs and things people were doing on it, but you have to think that's a whole branch of the military that we're pouring tons of money into.
Sure, yeah.
To do what? Protect the Earth and the country from what?
Yeah.
What brought this on? Is this a long time coming? Have they been planning this since Roswell?
Right.
And we're just now okay, now's the time?
It's all, yeah.
Or it does have something to do with the disclosure.
Sure.
Or maybe the leader of our country currently was we need to create this, and he signed off on it.
It's odd to me that all of these things are occurring at once, and that we got the all those dark days messages, at the end of last year, and that we had those TV warnings that suddenly sparked up in California about an alien invasion.
Yeah, and then even the thing that happened in Hawaii with the missile incoming alerts going off, but they said that was a user error type. Someone flipped the switch by accident, but still, we've had a lot of these false alarms, a lot of this stuff happening all at once, and in reality, we haven't had this type of information coming at us. And maybe it's something new with how we communicate now with social media, but with the dark days coming, the disclosures, all this seems to be kind of coming in at a rapid succession, and who knows what this year holds for us.
And, there was an old Art Bell caller who called in, one of Art Bell's most famous callers, who was supposedly on the run from Area 51, and said that all of these things were going to happen, said that there was going to be a false flag alien invasion, that the alien beings that our government believed were extraterrestrial were actually extra-dimensional and had orchestrated this whole thing, which, of course, is a wild concept, but I find it really weird that we go for years without hearing anything like this. And then all of a sudden we've got this shape that's coming from us from outer space that could very likely be some type of craft. We have these fast radio bursts that, like you said, are very likely from some civilization out there, And we have the Department of Defense admitting that they're investigating UFOs and that they're looking into weapons applications for the technology from these things. What a time to be alive, man.
Yeah, exactly.
What a time to be alive.
It is an amazing time to be alive. With all the technological advances we have, and with all this information coming out, it kind of makes you excited what this decade that we have just started.
Let me ask you this. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll go on to our next news item, and then I'll ask you this question. Anyway, these fast radio bursts, very interesting. Who knows what will come of them. They could hover over cities any day. But our next news item is one that Steven and I have been following for a long time. It actually prompted us to start this show.
Yeah, ATIB definitely, 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was when we found out that ATIB when the initial drop came out that ATIB existed. I think that's really when we were like, now's the time to jump on this because things are starting to go off.
Exactly, and we thought, okay, you know what, this would be great. We can start this podcast up and start, discussing this type of stuff that's coming out. And really, we have not run out of material since then.
No, it's. I mean, the more we dig, the more stuff has come out with ATIB, and with with the unknown and the paranormal in general, it seems to come out more and more every day.
Yeah.
But of course, this next news article that we are discussing comes from Popular Mechanics, one of the leading magazines on engineering and science in the nation. And it's by Tim McMillan. This was released on Valentine's Day of this year. It's simply titled "Inside the Pentagon's Secret UFO Program." He goes into amazing depths in this article about ATIB, about Bigelow Aerospace, about the other program that run alongside ATIB, the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program, which I think is extremely interesting. If there's one thing that this article showed me, it's that, that initial report where they said Louis Elizondo was the one-man team behind ATIB was complete and utter bullshit.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
This program is massive. Both of these programs are massive. And it seems like they definitely take up more manpower and more thoughts with the Department of Defense than they admitted to initially.
I think that's how stuff comes out of our government, is that it comes out slowly and in pieces. That way it doesn't have a shock value to it when it all comes out.
Right. It's kind of like the Stranger Things thing of watering the information. It's watering the vodka down so it doesn't hit you as hard.
Right. It's slowly dripping out, being watered down, and that way it's just kind of like, they're talking about that again,
right,
and go on. And they're slowly admitting to what they're doing, and then, people like you and I who kind of pay attention to this stuff.
Sure.
It's just like, geez, this is massive, but the person who just kind of is too busy or don't really care, it just kind of is just another news story, And
it's amazing that, those people, but, even if they didn't follow these things, it's almost funny how when, the normal citizen, the everyday normal citizen finds out about these things, they're like, well, of course that's happening. It's almost like they're not surprised that these things are happening. One of the most interesting things I found about this article is the author, Tim McMillan, like I said, goes into great lengths to showcase what exactly was going on at Bigelow Aerospace and with the ATIB program and with the Advanced Weapons Applications program. He actually lists some of the notable content of the 2009 BAASS 10-month report. BAASS obviously stands for Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies. But in their 10-month report on the ATIB and on their contract with the United States government, these are the things that they may mention. Some of these are incredible. I'm going to read just a couple of them. Overview of the Bass Physics Division's effort to conduct research on the advanced aerospace vehicles, including the development of standardization for measurement of physical effects and signatures associated with UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomena, the more professional word for UFO. It goes on. Overview of Bass research for measuring and gleaning the effects of biological organisms from UAPs. Mention of Skinwalker Ranch in Utah as a possible laboratory for studying other intelligences and possible interdimensional phenomena. Strategic plans to organize a series of intellectual debate forums targeted to broad audiences pertaining to the potential disclosure of an extraterrestrial presence. Plans to create a medical physiological UAP effects program. Request for Project Blue Book files that have not been made public. Mention of Bass program dubbed Project Northern Tier, which involves securing documents related to instances where dozens of UFOs flew over restricted airspaces of facilities housing nuclear weapons. A possible UAP landing reported to Bass by the Mutual UFO Network and its STAR team, rapid response field investigators funded by Bass in March 2009. Project databases of UAP-related materials compiled through various partnerships and the intent to expand upon these databases by coordinating with foreign governments. Summaries of multiple UAP events both inside the U.S. and in foreign countries, and photographs of UAPs provided by various sources, including foreign governments. Now that's a lot, but there is a lot going on there. Let's take a look at just this first one here. An overview of the physical effects and signatures associated with UAPs. Then number 2, this one's really wild. Overview of Bass research for measuring and gleaning the effects of biological organisms from UAPs. They're directly talking about aliens right there, for lack of a better word.
What else could they be talking about?
Yeah, biological organisms from UAPs. That implies that there is something living inside these craft.
Yeah, and this thing is something is not only living in these craft, but they're intelligently controlling this craft. And
not only that, but they are flying these craft over nuclear facilities and restricted aerospaces. In just the brief beginning of the article, he also mentions a high-level scientist, a science-minded person who went out to Skinwalker Ranch, and in front of him, this little geometric shape appeared and changed shape in front of him and then disappeared. And he went back and he told these people at Bigelow Aerospace, I assume, and that's when they were like, we need to get to Skinwalker Ranch and fund this research. And it's so interesting because Skinwalker Ranch is, it's interesting that that's kind of the beginning of all of this. Bigelow bought Skinwalker with the NIDS program to do research of this. And then, years later, we find out that he's been contracted by the government. It was probably contracted by the government with NIDS. So, I don't know, man. This is disclosure, for lack of a better word. This is a government-contracted program admitting that they are studying biological entities from UFOs.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're saying here. And again, it's kind of just being under the radar.
Yeah, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's in Popular Mechanics.
Yeah.
A magazine that less than 10 years ago basically thought UFOs were a joke.
Yeah. This is a new day. New disclosures are out, and now it is kind of becoming no longer a laughing matter. This has become an accepted fact.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things that I've realized that really dawned upon me when I started into this new research on the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program is something that you and I have talked about for a long time. We actually just talked about it in the first news segment of this episode when we were talking about extra dimensionals. Nick Redfern, excellent researcher who we've talked about on the show several times, and we've actually talked about this book on the show a few times. The name of the book is Final Events and the Secret Government Group on Demonic UFOs and the Afterlife. And Nick, in this book, is not proposing that these beings are demonic, but he says, to summarize this very, very quickly, he says that there has been a secret group that has been in touch with these beings for a long time. He says that when these beings initially got in touch with this group, and he has sources from this group. He has men who came to him specifically to talk to him about this group. He says that when these beings were initially encountered, they presented themselves as extraterrestrial. But as they communicated more and more, certain sects of this group began to believe that these beings were demonic in nature. The really weird thing about this is, and that sounds very far-fetched, the wild thing about this is, and I will try and find this article again if I can, I hope I can, and I will include it in the show notes. When the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program was initially announced, it was announced that one of the reasons that it took so long for this to become public is that there were members of the Department of Defense that believed that what they were dealing with was demons and not extraterrestrials, that they were seeing demons, that these things were demonic. That basically confirms exactly what Nick Redfern was writing about. I believe this book was published in 2009, years before ATIB would become public or the public would know anything about it. That confirms that there are people in our government that believe that these things are not what they are saying they are. To me, that also lends credence to the fact that maybe there is this group that is in contact with these beings, that maybe these beings have tried to present themselves as extraterrestrial, and they are not extraterrestrial. And I'm not saying they're demonic. I think maybe demonic is the best word that we have for it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because the same things that, came out in legit news publications, and I use legit, but these same things that were talked about in these newspapers were talked about by a UFO researcher years before that supposedly had government sources come to him and say, we are in contact with these beings, we do not think they have our best interests at heart, and we do not think they're telling us the truth about being extraterrestrial. We think they're from somewhere else. All of this stuff has come out through this Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
Right. In the amount of information is coming out, especially about these being demonic with, I guess for lack of a better term.
Sure.
Kind of falls back on them being interdimensional beings.
Absolutely.
And it kind of ties into things we have discussed in other episodes. It goes back on to the writings of John Keel.
Definitely.
It all kind of makes sense now with this disclosure coming out.
Absolutely. So, with all of these things in mind, with these, with these mystery drones, with these fast radio bursts, with this Oumuamua object gliding through space toward us, with the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, with their weapons application program. Again, what a time to be alive. Would you have thought 15 years ago, when we initially took up this subject, or however long ago it's been, would you have thought we would ever be sitting here today talking about a program that has been unclassified from the Department of Defense that admits to talking or to studying biological beings from UFOs? They've admitted to it.
I would have never thought it. When we was watching Sightings.
Yeah.
And the X-Files.
Sure.
On TV there. I would have never, ever expected this. When we was researching this stuff years ago, this has got way beyond anything I would have ever imagined.
Absolutely. So, what do you think about these things? What do you think about all this disclosure movement that is slowly coming out and is hitting right now in, the second month of 2020?
I think we gotta look at what information they're giving us and also look at what's missing.
Right.
Because I think they're giving us exactly what they want us to have.
Absolutely.
Or what's going to be coming down the road that they're preparing us for, because they're not going to be able to hide it anymore.
Right. This may be conspiratorial. This may be very conspiracy theorist in nature. But do you think it's a possibility that there is a branch of the government that is in contact with these entities, and that these entities have tried to pass themselves off as extraterrestrial when they may not be extraterrestrial, and they may not have our best interests at heart, and that these agencies have tried to push the narrative that they're extraterrestrial to kind of keep us all calm while they don't really know what they're dealing with.
I think that's highly probable.
Yeah.
Because if they are dealing with extraterrestrial, interdimensional, demonic, I highly doubt that they're the ones in control of the conversation.
Absolutely. That is an excellent point. It's almost like thinking, that if we could speak to ants, that, we're the ants. They're the humans or whatever.
Right. I mean,
it's almost thinking like the ant would have control of that conversation. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, we're humans. We barely can get cell phone coverage correct. What makes you think that we can control something that possibly come from another universe or from another dimension that's coming to us?
Another reality altogether.
Right.
Something altogether unhuman. And we're not even, there's that whole types of civilizations. Humans are not even a top 1 civilization yet. We're still top 2. We can't get our shit together. If these things are hive-minded, if these things are, even a little more advanced than us, you're right. There's no way we are controlling that conversation. That is an excellent point.
Yeah. I feel like, as we move along with this disclosure and it keeps coming out, I think the whole truth will eventually come out.
Sure.
But it may not be, come out all at once.
Right.
But I think it'll eventually trickle out. And then it'll be like, yeah, here's what's going on. And then it's become like everyday knowledge.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, back in the day, they thought, the sun rotated around the earth instead of the earth around the sun.
Sure.
The earth was flat. Different theories that has been disproven by science as we move down the road. And as we grow as humans and as a civilization. And I think once we continue to grow, the explanation for whatever's going on here will be accepted and we'll have to deal with it when we have to deal with it.
And when that time comes, what will we be dealing with?
At this point, it's undetermined.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for our news roundup for the month of February. We are going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with you guys speaking on the February 27th, 1993 dogfight with a police helicopter and an orb of light over Louisville, Kentucky. Strange case, very well-documented case, over a very populated area of the Bluegrass. So stick with us. We will be right back after this, and we will be taking a look at that. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be right back.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me now? Because I feel so alone. Hello, hello, hello. Can you free me now? Before this heart turns to stone. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye to everything that holds me behind. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye to everything that I tried to hide. 'Cause
Yes, you do. Today, I embrace the crazy that's been my life. Today, I can finally say that I'm happy to be alive. 'Cause no one knows what tomorrow holds. No, not me or you. And yesterday waits for no hand, so you better think this through. 'Cause no one knows what tomorrow holds. No, not me or you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Midnight in Kentucky. Tonight we are discussing the February 1993 dogfight with a police helicopter and orb of light over Louisville, Kentucky. This case is not widely known, but was actually picked up by one of my favorite 90s tabloids, supermarket tabloids, the Weekly World News. But it, as you guys will see in just a minute, it wasn't the Weekly World News that initially reported on it in the first place. It was actually reported on in much more legit, quotation marks, publications here in Kentucky. But I recently wrote an article about this for our local paper, the Lake Cumberland Current, here in Russell Springs. So I'm just going to read you guys the article out of that, and we will discuss. On February 27th, 1993, two Louisville Metro police officers on helicopter patrol over the city would allegedly be fired upon by an unknown craft in what appeared to be an evasive maneuver to escape detection. The event would forever change the lives of pilot Kenny Graham and spotlight operator Kenny Downs, both of whom were veterans of police work and aerial surveillance at the time of their encounter. When the officers noticed what looked like a fire to the left of their position, Downs shone his light on the area to provide better visibility. What the spotlight was illuminating was unlike anything the two had ever seen before. Before them, caught in the spotlight, a glowing pear-shaped craft about the size of a basketball was bobbing slightly back and forth. Suddenly, the object shot toward the helicopter at an incredible rate of speed and circled them 3 times, seemingly studying the machine before abruptly zipping off in the opposite direction. Then, the craft changed course again, once more coming straight toward the helicopter and without warning unleashing 3 fireballs in their direction. Before hitting the helicopter, however, the volley dissipated, and in a panic, thinking the object may try and ram the tail rotor, Graham accelerated to more than 100 miles per hour. With ease, the UFO blasted past the chopper and ascended hundreds of feet before dropping back down briefly. When Graham attempted to gain better visibility by heading for the craft, The object vanished into the distance, leaving the two officers shaken to the core. Kenny and I go to church every week, Downs had told the national tabloid sensation Weekly World News, speaking to the character of the two men, adding, "After this, I might start going twice a week." The encounter of Downs and Graham were witnessed from ground personnel as well. Officer Mike Smith reportedly watched the object for approximately a minute and says he witnessed the firing of the 3 fireballs, while Officer Joe Stromansky says he tried to catch up with the craft in his patrol car to no avail. The Courier Journal ran 2 separate stories on the incident before supermarket tabloids took notice and began running their own. The objects described in the dogfight over Louisville are far from unique. Both Lee Parrish and the Stanford 3 mistook the UFOs witnessed during their abduction events for a fire, in the same way Kenny Downs did, and this description shows up in many events around the world, many of those in Kentucky. This shows us 2 things. 1, that the unidentified objects seen in the skies over Kentucky are being reported similarly by multiple witnesses historically and beyond the Bluegrass. And 2, that those unidentified objects may not come in peace. So a very brief case this week, but a very odd case, and a case that demonstrates that these things are not always, just a light in the sky or a saucer in the sky. Sometimes these things can seemingly attack us or attack the witnesses that see them. So what were your initial takeaways from this incident?
Yeah, so this is the kind of, a moderately known case here in Kentucky.
Right. I actually think there was a sightings episode about this maybe as well.
Yeah, I think it's referred to as the one that the dogfight over the GE Appliance Park is where this occurred at.
Yes, yeah.
And to me there's a lot of takeaways to this. Is for one, the helicopter itself, at one point there's 100 miles an hour and this object was seamlessly, effortlessly keeping up with them and maneuvering in ways that our modern aircraft cannot.
Right.
Even if this was in 1993.
Yeah.
Even a modern day drone would more than likely have issue of doing this type of maneuvering with today's technology.
Sure. And, this was also a very tiny object, a pear-shaped object the size of a basketball. That's not very big.
No, not very big at all. And that's interesting that it's that size and that it was floating around like that.
Yeah.
And my question is, what was it and what was controlling it?
Sure.
Because, it almost hit the helicopter, and then, it did kind of the dogfight chase scenario there, and then it just gone.
Blinked out of existence, more or less, or just shot up and was gone.
Yeah.
There were a couple things about this case that hit with me on levels of other cases. For one, I began this article by talking about the Mantell case that occurred over Franklin, Kentucky. Of course, and we will go in depth on that case in a later episode. We've been needing to do that for a very long time. One of the major UFO cases here in Kentucky. Briefly, what happened with Captain Mantell is he pursued a UFO to the point that he was shot down and killed. One of the first casualties in the United States government's investigation of these craft, more or less.
Yeah, and there's actually a historical marker in downtown Franklin in front of the Tourist Commission commemorating the Mantell incident, and it actually says that he was chasing a UFO.
Right. The official story was that he went too high and ran out of oxygen. But, these pilots, especially at this time, when Mantell's incident occurred, I think this was 48, if I'm not mistaken, the year after Roswell.
It was in 48, yes.
When this occurred, these pilots were very, very well trained and had to have amazing eyesight. And one of the last things that Mantell, radios to Godman Tower, who was in contact with him, is that famous line, "My God, I can see people in this thing."
Yeah, I love that line.
Yeah, terrifying live.
Oh, it's terrifying. And that's one of the last things that he transmitted over his radio.
Yeah. And, you know, as a pilot, as a World War II veteran who had done combat time, I have a very hard time believing that what Mantell saw was the planet Venus. I have a very hard time believing that the reason that Mantell died was lack of oxygen.
There's been no other pilot, to my knowledge, that alive that has seen planet Venus and stated, my God, there's people inside this.
Exactly. But this case, this 1993 case over Louisville, has a lot of the same characteristics. I mean, we have a police helicopter, trained personnel, in a aerial vehicle who witnessed something that, you know, by all normal accounts should not be there. They pursue it. They try to pursue it. It very simply evades their pursuit. And not only that, but seemingly launches some type of torpedo or some type of projectile at the helicopter. What do you think about that? That's the oddest part of this case to me, because it seems like, you know, if they were trying to do damage, that they would have done damage. Or were these some type of flares? Were these some type of... What are your thoughts on that?
I think it was toying with the helicopter, but then it got to a point where it seemed like maybe in human emotions got frustrated and was like, back off. And that's when the projectile was kind of launched from
Interesting.
this.
So you think it was almost like reading the police officers in the helicopter, and they were scared, so it was like, all right, back off.
Yeah. And I guess whatever this object was or whatever it was controlling, it kind of got in a situation where it was trying to evade, and it was maybe having a little more difficulty than it should have.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, back off, and then it decides to vanish and go away. But, you know, a lot of people, like I think there was an officer on the ground.
Two different officers
that seen this going on. So, you know, you have 4 eyewitnesses, and I think a lot of, like, citizens around was seeing something. They wasn't sure what they were seeing.
Right.
But it's definitely something with that projectile. And it really, this is kind of one of the only cases, to my knowledge, where one of these objects has actually, I guess, fired upon one of our crafts.
Very weird. And, you know, it wasn't even that big of a craft. It was the size of a basketball.
Yeah.
And it shoots out these fireballs at these. Which brings me to the other thing that I thought was interesting. I don't know if you and I have ever discussed this case, but there's a case in Fargo, North Dakota. I can't remember the name of the police officer. Ironically, this involved a police officer as well. He sighted something like this craft that these men described in Louisville. It was a round basketball-sized orb of light, for lack of a better term, that comes straight in on his car, wrecked his car. He experienced missing time with this. He woke up in the ditch with his car wrecked. And actually, one of my favorite quotes ever in the field of ufology comes from this guy. There was an interviewer who asked about it years later to him and asked if he ever looked into it anymore. And he said something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said, "To be honest with you, I had a job to get back to. I had kids to raise. I had a family at home. Something weird happened to me out there, and that's all I know." And I love that quote because, you know, that seems to be the prevailing thing when people see something like this. They're like, something weird happened to me. But, you know, you can't stop your everyday life. A lot of people can't stop their everyday life to just go and dig into that. They've got to keep going.
Right. And I kind of wonder how many people has experience similar to his and just keep going and try to forget it.
Sure. Absolutely. How, you know, because these are traumatic events. These aren't something that, you know, a lot of people like to laugh at these things and like to say, well, you know, they were drunk, they were out of their minds, whatever. These, you know, these are trained personnel for these types of situations. What I found so interesting about that, though, is that he describes almost exactly the same thing, colliding with his car, that these men describe trying to fire on their helicopter.
Yeah.
And actually, that story was the basis for Fargo Season 2, which included a lot of UFO activity in it. Great show. If anybody out there has watched it, I highly recommend it. It treats the UFO subject very, very, very good. But this story actually inspired that. Another thing that I found interesting was the description of fire. I'll let you take over there because I know that, how often have we heard, I thought it was a fire be said in an investigation?
I mean, we've discussed it on lots of previous podcasts, and it's a very good point because I did not think of that. I mean, the one here in Russell County, we've discussed that.
Another police officer.
Ironically, yeah. I mean, even, she was the popular one, Fire in the Sky.
Yeah.
I mean, the list just goes on and on for these things being referenced as fire.
Absolutely. And, even the way that these men describe the UFO goes back to the way that James Bunch describes the UFO over this person's house that we talked about in an earlier episode. It sits there briefly and then just shoots up and disappears.
Yeah, and vanishes.
Almost the exact same description as this thing with this helicopter.
Yeah. And ironically, both in Kentucky.
Both by police officers, reliable witnesses. A very strange case. A brief case, a short case, but really illuminates the fact, going back to the ATIB thing, ATIB has this weapons application program that they want to, that's another one of these programs sprung off ATIB. Are these weapons applications that the government wants to apply? Is it something like these fireballs that this UFO is shooting at this helicopter?
I think it's a good possibility because whoever has a weapon system like that and has the maneuvering like that could pretty much control anything they wanted to on this planet.
Absolutely. Or, is that to get conspiratorial with it? Are they going to use this technology to frame this false flag alien invasion?
Very likely, because that's what's spoke about in Unacknowledged. And it seems like we're getting closer and closer to that being a possibility.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. So with that, we will take a very, very short break, and we will come back with our final thoughts on this case. Thank you for listening to Midnight Kentucky. We'll be right back.
Hell, I'd stayed, 'cause maybe I would have not become the man that
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Midnight in Kentucky. This evening we have been discussing the news around the world for February 2020 and the February 27th, 1993 dogfight of a UFO and a police helicopter over Louisville, Kentucky. Very strange case, very interesting case. One of the only cases that I can recall that a UFO has actually seemed to take aggressive maneuvers on someone pursuing it. So what are your final thoughts? What are your conclusions on this particular incident?
I believe the incident definitely 100% occurred. It's unknown whatever this object was that was around the helicopter and that fired the projectile at them. I definitely don't think it's anything man-made. I don't think it was anything being controlled by a human. It was definitely something not from this planet or not from this dimension.
Sure.
Or some type of weird phenomenon in our environment that we do not understand yet.
Sure. That seems to have a form of intelligence if it's, preternatural.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it definitely had some type of intelligence behind it, controlling it.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what I find so interesting about incidences like this, and incidences like the Fargo thing that we were talking about before. In the ATIB briefing that we were talking about earlier, they were talking about studying biological entities from UAPs, from unidentified aerial phenomena. So, with the size of these things, what are these? Are these some type of drone from UFOs? Are these some type of, what exactly is this thing? And if the biological entities can be studied from these other craft, then what's controlling these? How are these being controlled?
It could be a lot of things. It could be some type of probe that's being controlled from somewhere, or it could be, I guess this sounds kind of silly, but maybe it's from a world where the beings and life itself is smaller than what we're used to.
Sure.
And maybe that can explain how they can maneuver so quickly, because their world is maybe not much like ours.
Right.
I mean, we could be dealing with a different form of life.
Or, and I just kind of put this together when you said that. The descriptions of these things are very fairy-like as well, or fae-like. One could almost say that the description of this thing kind of looks like Tinkerbell from Peter Pan.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good point. It could be some type of life form, such as what we would call fairy,
preternatural. Inborn to the earth, some type of earth spirit.
Right.
It's an interesting thing. My thoughts are, on the size of this thing, and I kind of just developed this idea, while you were talking about that. Both Calvin Parker and Lee Parrish talk about how it seemed like once they were aboard, in their abduction experiences, once they perceived that they were aboard these craft, it seemed like the craft itself was massive, much bigger than it appeared on the outside.
Yeah. So
it makes you wonder if maybe these, and this sounds kind of silly too, I guess, but it almost makes you wonder if you were able to get inside of this thing, like if you somehow got inside of this ball of light, if the interior of it, if that's even what you can call it, wouldn't appear to be much more massive than the outside of it.
It's like a portal into another room or another realm that's larger.
Sure, exactly. That it also seems to be intelligently controlled somehow, however that is.
Yeah. I think all these experiences, it seems to be controlled by an intelligence higher than what we have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, as we will discuss in our recap review discussion on Hellier Season 2, and as we will discuss with the guys from the International Paranormal Museum, it seems like, and as we've discussed about Skinwalker Ranch, it seems like that intelligence, whatever that intelligence is, likes to play tricks on us. It likes to mess with us. And, you know, maybe that's what the firing of those fireballs were. You know, it wasn't like it actually hit the helicopter. It wasn't like it actually done any damage. It was just kind of like, it's almost like a clown with that fake gun and shooting it out that says bang on the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like a trickster thing.
Yeah, and all these things have a trickster mentality to them.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder what that's about. What the purpose of that is. Why this intelligence seems to just like to kind of screw with our heads.
Yeah, it seems like it likes to mess with us, and there's several documented cases where that type of mentality occurs.
Right. Several here in Kentucky, you know. But ultimately, we continue to see these odd cases, these orbs of light, in conjunction with these much larger craft. There seems to be something to be said for for whatever reason, and I don't know, I may be wrong here. It seems like Kentucky may be the capital of UFO aerial pursuits or UFO dogfights. You know, we've got Mantell, we've got this, we have, and this is an aerial, but we've got what we're going to be talking about at the sidecar in March. We've got the train car that supposedly collided with one of these craft. It seems like these things are just everywhere. And, you know, if you're in a helicopter, or if you're in a plane, or if you're in a train, you could hit one of these things easily.
It seems like the Bluegrass state is very populated with these once you start looking at the evidence.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder, you know, if it's extraterrestrial, what Kentucky has to offer that these extraterrestrials are like, let's go there. Or if it's extra-dimensional, why the veil seems to be thinner here, why they seem to come over easier here. Or if it's preternatural, what is it about Kentucky that these beings live here? Why here, of anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, there were several questions I think we have that, I mean, there's a lot of things to the state, you know, such as the cave system, for one.
Sure. The amount of running water.
The amount of running water in lakes and rivers and streams, and then we got the mountains over in the eastern part.
Yeah, the gateway to the Appalachians, where, speaking of Hellier 2, where Tanya Derenberger said that Indrid Cold said that they love it because they can hide in it.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's so many things to the state that there's not many states like Kentucky that has a different geographical makeup like Kentucky does.
Right, absolutely. Believe that's going to do it for Midnight in Kentucky for this evening. Thank you guys so much for listening. We're working on some different stuff. Some big news is coming. Hopefully we can share that with you guys soon. In the meantime, we're working on getting the Ransom Letter Publishing, our publishing company's YouTube, up and running. Getting some episodes back up on there. Check that out if you haven't. We've got, I believe, the first 5 episodes up and running on there now. We're going to have some new episodes of Midnight in Kentucky on there, along with some other podcasts we're working on, some other projects we're working on. We've got a lot of really cool stuff coming. We're working on getting a Patreon up and running. We're going to have a lot of different tiers, a lot of different offerings. Let us know if that's something you guys are interested in. If you know, you guys would be interested in supporting the podcast, giving Stephen and I more time to come up with content, more time to investigate, more time to look into these things. We're also getting ready to set up a TeePublic where you guys can get coffee mugs and t-shirts and all manner of Midnight in Kentucky stuff. That'll also probably be run through our Ransom Letter Publishing, so that'll be, you know, band merch from RLP. There'll be other podcast merch, so got a lot of good things coming. In addition, one more time,
we're going to be at the Sidecar Friday the 13th, coming up here in just a few weeks. The Sidecar's going to be in Lexington, Kentucky. Come out and see us.
It's going to be a heck of a show. Like Stephen has said, come check out Midnight Kentucky. Go off the rails, because it very well may do just that. This being our first live show. But it's going to be fun. We're going to talk about a collision with a possible collision with a UFO and a train car out in Paintsville, Kentucky, right there in an abandoned train car. So no better place to talk about it.
Hey, I couldn't think of a better place to discuss that incident than the sidecar.
Absolutely. And we'll be covering March 2020 paranormal, supernatural, weird stuff news with that show as well. We'll be with Culture Trap John Swanson and the debut of the Unusual Encounters Band. It's going to be a great show. Looking forward to it. Till then, till the next episode, till the next moon rises, Nightowls. For Midnight Kentucky, I'm Ben.
I'm Steven.
Good night.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.